what you say is important, but how you say it is equally, if not sometimes more important. And even as I'm talking to you now, you can hear how I'm emphasizing certain words. I'm pausing after certain things I say to let it sink in, right? Suddenly I pause and you're like, wait, she stopped talking. What was that, right? So, if you think about people who will get up and read a story in front of the class, we've all been there as students in school, or, I have a daughter and two daughters actually, and they get up and they'll give presentations. And sometimes they'll just read something and they'll read it like this and they might say the most amazing things. But did you get what I said? No, it was all just one monotonous blah.
Welcome back to the Ambitious Introvert Podcast. I'm Emma-Louise, and I really, really wanted to name this episode Video Killed the Radio Star. However, I am aware that the demographic of my audience is a little younger generally than I, so I didn't do it. However, if you are of a certain age and you're listening, I had to get the reference in because I am interviewing the amazing Shirlee Engel today. Shirlee's a former TV correspondent turned entrepreneur, and she helps business owners and ambitious professionals to develop a magnetic on-camera presence so they can get booked on media, podcasts, and stages. Now, video is literally everywhere. I was thinking after recording this episode, every single client of mine uses video in some way, whether they are entrepreneurs and they have a social media presence, so they're talking on video, whether they get interviewed on video podcasts. Even if they're creatives that do most of their work behind the scenes, they still get on calls with potential clients. And some of my founder clients often pitch for investment and look at ways of expanding their business by collaborations. So they'll be literally having calls on Zoom to turn up and pitch the ideas of their business to ask people to invest in them, like really important stuff. And then on the executive side, of course, so much is carried out via Teams or Zoom these days. And I've even just had a client actually interview for a new role, which was on the other side of the country, on Teams. So video is literally everywhere. And something that I hear a lot from introverts is that they are, quote unquote, not good at it or just feel intimidated and don't like doing it. So when I saw Shirlee, I knew I had to bring her on so that we could chat about it. Shirlee has a signature program called the Camera Confident Academy, and that's where she teaches the skills needed to shine on camera, which she says go beyond just video presence. So it helps professionals to become more confident in the boardroom, on Zoom meetings, or during live presentations as well. So this is such a fun episode. I loved talking to Shirlee. She shares generously her tips on how to be more confident on camera. We talk about how it's a learnable skill and it's developed through practice. We talk about what effective on-camera presence actually means. What does that combine? She talks about how small adjustments in your body language, the way you enunciate, your tone of voice, and of course your mindset can hugely improve your performance on video. And also why preparation and consistent practice are key to succeeding, the same as they are with anything in life. So I really hope that you enjoy our chat, and whatever walk of life you're in and wherever video is important to you, I really hope that you can take some tips from Shirlee and improve it even more. So Shirlee, do you remember the first time that you were on video?
Oh, the first time I was on video was when I was a kid. And unfortunately, it was played at my wedding. And it was pretty embarrassing. I think it was something along the lines of I had just gotten my first Nintendo as a gift for a holiday. And I was just going ballistic in front of the camera. And my husband had never seen that video and proceeded to taunt me about it, probably I'd say to this day. So yeah, I do remember that. And it wasn't good. And just for anyone listening, it's never good the first time. And that's okay. That's why you got to just push through it. And look at where I am today.
That is such an important piece of advice that I think with anything visibility related is that the first time is always going to feel hard. But one of my clients was asking me about the podcast, and she's like, don't you overthink it? And don't you get nervous? And don't you? I was like, I've literally done it 200 times.
Wow.
Like,
That's
no, I
that's the
don't. But I used to. Did I in the first 20 episodes? Yes, totally. But you grow, you evolve, you get used to it.
That's right. And, people are always asking for shortcuts. And there's obviously a lot, and I know we're going to talk about some methods to really improve your on-camera presence and all of that and how you deliver and how you speak. But you've got to just keep showing up. You've got to do it. You're not going to get better by reading about it, getting information about it, looking up techniques. You have to actually practice. And this is one of those things that you can't study. You have to actually implement and do it to not only get better, but get more comfortable doing it.
So my experience with video is quite interesting because I have never been that nervous. Like a lot of people will say, I don't like doing video because I'm an introvert, which I would call out because that's nothing to do with it. It's just that maybe you've got visibility fears or you're not used to doing it and it feels uncomfortable. But that's never really bothered me. I never thought what if I look like this or anything. For me, it's the production of setting the lighting up and making sure that the camera's right and getting the microphone and doing making myself look half decent and all of that. Sometimes that feels, as an introvert, that feels like a real effort. It can be like a real barrier to entry for me.
Absolutely. And it's a barrier for entry for extroverts as well. I mean, this isn't just an introvert thing. That is why one of the most important things you can do to show up consistently is set yourself a day where you're going to do the whole rigmarole. You're going to set up the lights. You're going to do your makeup if you wear makeup. You're going to get yourself looking camera ready, whatever that means to you, right? There's no one way to do that because you want to show up as your authentic self. And then you get yourself in the zone, you plan in advance, and you just knock off everything that you need to do on that specific day. And then you're off the hook, right? Until the next time. So a lot of people make this mistake, and introverts in particular, they wake up and they're like, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't feel like talking to anyone. I just want to do my own thing. And then there's this big mountain they have to climb. And then when they eventually do show up, their energy's off. People can feel it. People can really pick up on these things, even if they don't know you. Whereas if you actually prepare and put in a little bit of effort to batch your video production process, then you can mentally and physically prepare for it, and then it's over. There's a beginning and an end, and you've got it out of the way, and then you can relax and continue to do the rest of what you need to do until the next time. So it does take some planning in advance, but that's part of the skill of developing this consistency that today's marketplace really does demand, no matter what you're doing. If you're a business owner, a business leader, a professional, there is an element of planning that is required.
I think video is just so all-encompassing now in every aspect of our lives because obviously social media, if we think back 10 years ago, Instagram was still static photographs, and then video started, stories began, and then every other platform dipped a toe, and then TikTok obviously exploded. YouTube became much more accessible for people starting their own channels. And then, as you said, for business leaders, for professionals, since lockdown, so many meetings have been carried out over Zoom. People are interviewing over Zoom. It's just in so many areas of our life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you brought up Zoom because sometimes clients come to me and they're like, well, I'm not super active on social. I don't really want to be on Instagram. I don't need to do reels and, this cliche of like dancing in front of the camera and all of that. But never before has it been more important to be effective on video, no matter what you do. Because if you're in a meeting and you want to convey your point of view, or you want to influence a particular strategy or the direction of something in the workplace, if you show up with that confidence on video, if you don't have your background optimized, your setup, and this doesn't have to be super fancy. We're not talking tons of, investment in gear and all of that, but just simple, basic things. Like, for example, making eye contact with the camera. That is one simple change that people can make today no matter what they're doing, whether they're on Zoom, whether they're recording a story on their phone, a reel, what have you, just that simple change of instead of looking at yourself, which, we're inclined to do, right? It's this unnatural thing. You see yourself on video, or maybe you're looking at the person that you're speaking to in a meeting or, in another context. But when you do that, it's almost it is the equivalent of not making eye contact with that person in person, right? And in terms of being effective, being an influential, persuasive speaker, getting your point across, not making eye contact is a huge, huge mistake that can cost you that, that extra little bit that can really make the difference between you being sort of heard and you actually being listened to.
So what is really interesting about that for me as a coach is I want to watch my clients because I want to watch their body language. I want to watch their facial expressions. I want to watch where they put their eyes when they're saying certain things so that I can pick up on stuff. But then I have to remember when I am presenting something, let's say I'm doing a workshop, it's very different. I need to look up then at the camera because I'm so used to focusing on the client, which that's fine. It's all about the client, right? During a client call. But if I'm doing something that's more public face, I'm constantly like, look up, look at the camera.
Look at the camera. So a couple things that I want to say about that. There is another extreme, which is locking eyes with the lens and not moving your eyes. That's the equivalent
Intense.
of in person. Have you ever talked to someone where like they don't look away and you feel like you're in a staring contest? We don't want to do that either, right? So as I'm talking to you right now, I'm looking at the lens, but then I'm looking down at you, or I'm looking off to the side as I make a point. Like that's the natural way we speak. The trick is that what's not natural about the camera, especially in a Zoom conversation, is that you're doing a lot less looking at the actual person, right? So in your mind, you feel like you're not making eye contact, but in fact, you are. So I think there's a healthy balance. So you look at the lens, particularly when you're speaking, right? And then when the person is speaking, you do still want to look at the lens, but you also want to, occasionally look at them, because if you think about it, that person is looking at you speaking. And if right now we're talking and I'm looking down at you and you're listening to me, what a difference it makes when I look up at the lens and then it's like, I've looked up at you again, right? So it's it's something you have to get used to, but it is such a subtle, but yet very important thing.
So we really should have done this as a video. I really thought about doing this. You were on my mind yesterday because with you being a video expert and because as we're chatting before I hit record, I've been thinking about doing a video element to the podcast, even just for the marketing. And this would have been a great example, but you live and learn. Sorry, folks, no
That's
video
okay.
today.
You're going to be on my podcast, and that's going to be on video.
That is a video. Okay, so that's to get anyone listening that wants to see me not making eye contact. You can come and listen. Come and listen on Shirlee's podcast. Okay, so as much as obviously I introduced you at the start of the episode, as much as your Nintendo episode gives you so much credibility. Let's talk a little bit about the more recent experience that you have on camera so people can understand, like, who is she to be explaining this to us? When you were a news anchor, what kind of training did you have to go through to ensure that you were camera ready?
Zero.
I love it. I knew it was either going to be an extreme amount or nothing.
No. I cut my teeth at a small community television station where I was a volunteer reporter. So I would take the bus 2 hours each way. So that's 4 hours in one day just to volunteer at this TV station. That's how badly I wanted to do it. And I just started. I started doing stuff in front of the camera. I was terrible, as many people are. And it wasn't just in how I showed up on camera, my delivery being stiff and all of these things that people think about when they first show up on camera. But one of the most important foundational things about being camera ready is knowing what you're going to say. So it took me years to really hone the skill of writing for broadcast, writing for video. And once you master that skill, And in these days, we've got this wonderful tool like ChatGPT or AI to help you do that if it's a heavy lift. And I use it all the time with my clients. Once you know what you're going to say, that is such a big lift to then get you to focus on how you say it, right? So for me, it was really having to learn both of those things at the same time, which took some time. And then it was honestly watching myself back. Huge, 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 important thing to do. I hated every minute of it. I still hate watching myself to this day. But also getting sometimes unsolicited critiques and advice, which, when you put yourself out there as a journalist, which I was for almost 20 years, I once had a producer sit me down and say, Shirlee, when you talk to the camera, you're moving your head too much. And you might hear the clinking of my earrings right now as I'm doing that. Little things like that, right? Keeping your head straight, but don't keep it too straight because then you look like a robot. So there is a lot of this kind of trying, experimenting, recording, and then watching yourself back that really is going to make or break. So in terms of my journey, that's where I started. I started as a videographer, so I was doing everything from the camera work to the editing to the reporting, one-woman show. And then I just worked my way up to a reporter in a medium market. Then I became a live television reporter in Toronto, Ontario, which is the biggest market in Canada. And I would go on the news and they'd stick me in front of something that was happening and be like, okay, go. And I just had to tell people what was happening. And that was a trial by fire. And there was just something about that live element that I really took to. And I became a go-to live reporter and eventually was transferred to Canada's capital of Ottawa, where I became a Parliament Hill correspondent and traveled the world with prime ministers covering national news. And that's where I really honed my on-camera skills. I then went on to do consulting, communications consulting for executives, coaching them on what to say, how to say it. A lot of it was crisis communications type stuff because there was sometimes a political slant. And then I launched my own business and started to promote myself on television appearances, through video. I built an Instagram following and I started getting lots of questions about how I was doing that. And that's how Camera Confident was born. And so now I am really passionate about helping entrepreneurs, business leaders, people who want to be in front of the camera on how to do that, how to be effective, and how to really get their message across.
And before we hit record, we were talking about this, which I love, of how you were advised of, because you do have a broad skill set and all of this experience from your broadcast and PR days of what you could help people with. You could help them with finding PR or podcast guesting, but that actually what you found is clients are coming to you because they want to be confident on camera. It's something people are actively looking. It's a skill people are actively looking to build.
Absolutely. So I landed on this title or this name for my business, Camera Confident. And I got advice from business coaches saying, oh, what does that mean? Do we mean still camera? Do we mean, they started really parsing and pulling apart the name of my business. And shouldn't you be focusing more on PR because you're helping people get on TV and on podcasts and all of that? You really have to listen to your people. And what I found is people were coming to me because of the name Camera Confident. It was simple. It was easy to understand. I want to be confident on camera. How much more can you be specific? Just like you were saying with introverts, right? If I'm an introvert, that's what I'm going to be looking for help with, right? And in order to get people to those media appearances and to those podcasts, which I do help clients with, we've got to rewind the tape and first start with, wait, but what are you saying? What are you trying to get across? Are you using the right words? Are you scripting it properly? No matter how long you've been showing up on camera, I see this all the time. Even with my own messaging, you have to keep it current and you have to ensure that you are really getting your message across. So, it's not sexy to sell messaging per se, but that's where we start. We start with what to say. And then, yes, we will build up to quite quickly, actually, getting you on podcasts and media and stages and all of that. But, there are no shortcuts. you've got to make sure that you've got the right building blocks.
And it's so true. Like, what is the point in landing a great podcast guest, interview, and then you turn up and you don't know how to conduct it because you don't feel confident on camera?
Yeah, or you don't really truly know how to connect to what you're saying. Because one thing that people don't realize is, you can write the best script in the world. You can have the best messaging. You can hire a copywriter all day long to get you exactly what to say. But if you're not connecting to those words, if you're not practicing saying them out loud, figuring out where to emphasize the right words, when to pause for effect, right? All of these techniques are so important because what you say is important, but how you say it is equally, if not sometimes more important. And even as I'm talking to you now, you can hear how I'm emphasizing certain words. I'm pausing after certain things I say to let it sink in, right? Suddenly I pause and you're like, wait, she stopped talking. What was that, right? So, if you think about people who will get up and read a story in front of the class, we've all been there as students in school, or, I have a daughter and two daughters actually, and they get up and they'll give presentations. And sometimes they'll just read something and they'll read it like this and they might say the most amazing things. But did you get what I said? No, it was all just one monotonous blah. And that's what a lot of people do, introverts and extroverts, right? So it's not about exaggerating and sounding like, a news anchor, but you do have to find that broadcast version of yourself that works.
That's how my mum used to read bedtime stories.
In a monotonous?
Yeah, I don't know if she was trying to send me to sleep, but I remember my big sister saying to her once, she was like, Mum, you need to put some oomph in it. So my mum just carried on in this monotonous voice, then went, and then read a few more words and then went,
Well, there may have been an agenda there to get you to sleep. So
there could have been. It could have been very smart, but it's so true. And, you and I talked about this when we first connected. I know we're going to talk about it on your podcast. Another reason for people to come over when I'm a guest on there. But as an air traffic controller, my enunciation and the words that I focused on and gaps in the right places and the emphasis of syllables, the tone of my voice. It's the only way I could communicate what I needed pilots to do. So being able to use your voice effectively in that way to get their attention was critical.
And I love that. When we first met and I found out that you did that, I was just like, oh my God, I could probably learn about voice from you because I hope you never had to say this, but, watch for that plane coming straight at you, right? You can say, watch for that plane coming straight at you, or looking straight at you, right? Same words, but different. And of course, I'm giving the extreme, cliche version of what air traffic controllers do. You probably never uttered those words. But I love that you got a chance to really hone your voice. Because, I was asked this the other day. I was interviewing a voice coach for my podcast, and she asked me, she said, when you were a journalist, how much voice coaching or voice training did you get? And I said, 0. It was about me in the voice booth practicing saying that line again and again. And I'm going to emphasize this. And eventually I learned how to write my scripts in a way that mirrored how I speak. Right. And I would even put like a ... like an ellipses to remind myself to pause at certain times. And, that art of speaking and in a podcast setting is crucial, right? Because who's going to listen to a podcast where it's just a monotonous, boring voice like this? I'm just going to change the channel. I'm driving. I can't go to sleep. I've got to watch the road, right?
That's why I've never interviewed my mum on the podcast.
Or have a disclaimer, do not drive or operate machinery while listening.
Yeah, it's like hypnosis.
Yeah.
But that's really permission given. And I'm glad you said that, because it's so easy for people to see someone like yourself who looks amazing on camera, is super confident, and think, oh, but it's okay for her. That must just come naturally. It's easy for her. She has that talent and I don't. What you're saying is you honed it, you focused on it, you've spent time cultivating it and improving and taking feedback, which doesn't always feel great, but using that to get better and better and better.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's something that I really have to raise awareness about. That just because it took me all those years to hone it, it doesn't mean it has to take you that long. And I've developed a system and a framework that actually gets these results for clients a lot faster than, I had to make mistakes. I had to twist in the wind. I had to figure it out on my own. I didn't have a coach along the way. Unfortunately, with journalism, in the state of journalism right now, even when I started, there's no time to sit down and really perfect those skills. If anything, it's kind of like acting. You try out. You either get the gig or you don't, and you have to be good to get on air. Nobody's going to take you by the hand and teach you ABC. Sure, maybe some of the anchors would get some coaching here and there, but resources are scarce, and they want the best people, right? So there are ways to really learn this as a professional. You don't have to be a news anchor or reporter, but you can use some of these strategies and really leverage the knowledge of people who've been doing this for a really long time to be able to shortcut your own success. And the beauty of today and the beauty of not being a news anchor or reporter and being on video is you don't have to fit into this persona, right? You don't have to be the news anchor or, the stoic reporter on scene who can't feel any emotions or give their opinion about what's happening. Just tell me what's happening and don't tell me what to think about it. As, a business owner, a business leader, a professional, you get to show up as your authentic self. And if anything, that's what social media demands. That's what the workplace demands now. People don't want fake. They want authentic.
So please share with us a little more about your framework. I know we're not going to be able to cover too much of it, but I would love listeners to get an overview of the things that you help your clients to focus on that are the most valuable for them to really cultivate that confidence.
Absolutely. So it's really a 3-part framework. And the 3 pillars are what to say. So this is your messaging. This is the stories you tell. And I can get into some more detail on that. The second is how to say it, as I've been saying. And the third is how to create buzz, whether it's around your brand or around you as a professional, as someone who is sort of if you will, I'd like to say celebrity in your niche, in your space, in your workplace. I don't mean like Taylor Swift kind of celebrity. I just mean someone who is well-known, someone who's respected for their authority, their credibility, that know, like, and trust factor. It all starts with what to say. So one of the first things that I do with clients is really nail down their key messaging. And I have a framework for this called the Key 5 Blueprint. And it really is an easy shortcut to knowing exactly what to say, because everything that you say should be deliberate and related back to your objectives or your goals, right? So a lot of people will go out and throw spaghetti at the wall and, I'll talk about this today, or I'll go into this, meeting with this, or they'll just kind of whatever is on their mind that day. But you want to be more strategic about it, because what you end up doing is you end up having this element of repetition, which is a good thing, which is what people get to know about you. Just like you with people will equate you with introvert and your podcast. And so you have built a brand. And all of that goes back to what you're saying, right? So what you're saying is obviously about the key messaging for you, and also understanding the people you're talking to, your audience. So often people will really focus on them. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about what I do. I want to talk about how I help, or the, the value that I can bring. But attention spans are so short these days. People are really looking for what's in it for them. So that's a critical part of the equation that if you haven't spent time thinking about, that's somewhere that I would definitely start. The other thing is that we all connect through story, right? And it's often easy to lose good storytelling in today's fast-paced social media world. So we really spend time figuring out what are the stories that are going to help convey your messages. So sometimes those are personal stories, stories about you, about your background, about things that have happened to you. Sometimes, let's say if you're in the space where you have a service-based offering and you have testimonials or clients or people who you helped or situations where you were able to really apply your expertise. Well, you need to weave those stories through what you're saying. And that's a really great way to be more effective on camera, because when you go unscripted, when you start to really connect with what you're saying and you talk about a story, well, that really helps you be a more effective speaker. So combining that key messaging with those stories and really figuring out what exactly you're going to say, how you're going to talk about it, and having a plan for that, then we can move into how to say it. And how to say it is a couple of things. The first thing, obviously, is we really work on the vibe, right? So what is the vibe of what you want to put out there? What is the body language that you need to be aware of? Because sometimes in your body language, you could inadvertently be turning people off or sending off the wrong message, portraying insecurity, portraying standoffishness, right? You want to be open. So we really go through the body language, the vibe, and then, of course, things like how to use your voice effectively, how to really position yourself on camera, even in a Zoom call. There's simple things that we work on, your background, your lighting, all of those kinds of things to really bring you alive. And then the last piece, obviously, is what good is all that if nobody knows you exist, right? If a tree falls in the forest. So then we really work on getting you out there. So what are some podcasts, if that's a route that you want to be on? If you'd like to be on television, a lot of people find television this big black box, this mystery, this really intimidating thing. So strategies on how to pitch properly. What do you say? How do you follow up? Things like that. And then really just getting yourself out there, whether it's on stages or on screen or on podcasts. So it's a really multifaceted framework, but we actually accomplished this in 12 weeks. And we've seen with students in our Camera Confident Academy program results within weeks. I have had people get on live TV within weeks. I've had people go give their first presentation. So there's so much you can accomplish even in a few short weeks. And I find the more people put this off and build this up into this thing, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it when I have more experience. The time to start really is now.
When you said body language, I think it was you and I that talked about this last time. When people are too close to the camera or too far away, because I've had that where someone gets on a call and the setting, they're so far away. It's like this, I'm doing this, no one can see it except you. But, like their head's like a little pin and I can barely see their face. And then other people, they're so close to the camera, it's cutting the top of their head up. And like you said, it feels very intimidating. I'm like, whoa, this person's right in my space. Like, right. They're not. They could be the other side of the world. But the energy is that they feel very, very close.
Absolutely. And there is such a thing as personal space, even on video, right? And so a lot of times it's just a matter of using those same social rules, if you will, and applying them to the camera. So when you're talking to someone at a dinner party or you're at a networking event, you're making eye contact, right? So make eye contact with the lens. You're not standing in their personal space because that's, as you mentioned, can be, for some people a flat out turnoff, but you're also not standing across the room, like I don't want to have to use a megaphone.
With a megaphone shouted at them.
Right? And then that brings me to another really important point. And this is really useful for introverts who get intimidated by the idea of, speaking on camera. People often go on camera and they think they're speaking to this huge audience. And then they get nervous and they get overwhelmed and they get in their head. And what do I look like? What if you only spoke to one person, right? So instead of picturing this big crowd on the other side of the lens, picture a person you know. Picture a friend, a spouse, a partner, a parent, a child, someone who you can easily have a conversation with. And I have seen monumental changes in my students, in my clients, in how they approach the camera when they suddenly start to speak to someone they know. So I have a client, lovely, lovely woman who realized that speaking to her mother just instantly changed how she spoke. And we have a Facebook group where we post videos and, we give some guidance and we give feedback. And she had posted videos before, and then she posted a video where she made that one change. And I got goosebumps because all of a sudden she came alive in a way that I had not previously seen on video. And that was a simple mindset change. So we're not talking months and months and years to become an effective speaker and make these changes. Even as an introvert, a simple change like that can suddenly make the experience a lot more intimate, a lot less intimidating, and ultimately you become a more effective speaker because you've humanized this experience.
That's something that a lot of my clients who have podcasts say, that they feel like a bit of a numpty when they're recording a solo episode. Because obviously when you have a guest there, it's great. You're in conversation, you have something to respond to. But a lot of them always say to me, I just feel so stupid doing a solo one because I'm not talking to anyone. And I said, well, then talk to someone. I always think of a client. I always think of, like, if I'm talking about something in a solo episode, it's usually something that's come up for clients or, a conversation I'm having with peers. So I'm like, what would I say if I was just recording a voice note to a client? How would I tell them about this? So I've always got that in my mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I do solo podcast episodes too, and I do video podcasts, right? I'm a video person. So it is about connecting to that person, right? And sometimes it's a simple little tweak, like, a small smile, just a hint of a smile when you talk. It instantly changes your voice too. If I'm talking to you like this and I'm not smiling, and then suddenly I start smiling, do you hear the difference in my voice? Like, that's an instant change. So another thing I want listeners to take away from this is that this is not as big a mountain to climb as you think. There are simple changes that you can make right away that can really make such a difference in your impact, whether you're recording a podcast, whether you're a podcast guest, whether you're in a Zoom meeting, whether you are creating video content for social media. It really is the small things, the rolling your shoulders back when you speak so that your voice projects better, right? Because if I record like this with my shoulders slouched, then all of a sudden I sound different. Whereas if I roll my shoulders back, do you see how that instantly changed my voice? So these are small changes and they are really subtle, but they have a huge impact.
So valuable. I know you have so many great tips to share, not only in your program, but also on your social media. So I'm going to make sure to link all of your links in the show notes so anyone can come over and find you and learn more from your expertise and wisdom. So thank you so much for being here on The Ambitious Introvert. I have loved this chat. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again in a few weeks for your podcast. But before I let you go, even though you are more to the extroverted side, I still want to ask you, what practices or ways do you have to make sure that you own your energy so that you can keep performing at your best in life and business?
Yes. And I am an extrovert, but I do have introvert tendencies. I have a lot of days where I wake up and I'm just not feeling it. So I think that's important to emphasize, is that I think you can have elements of both. What do? When I get ready to go on camera, I put on very specific songs that really pump me up. And sometimes I flat out break out into a big dance in my room, getting ready. We're talking hairbrush as a microphone, whatever you need to do to get yourself in the zone, because a lot of times it's about loosening your body, right? So if you think about athletes, if they're going to go run a race or they're going to do something physical, and showing up on camera is a very physical activity as well, right? It takes a lot out of you. You wouldn't go do that race without warming up, would you? So I do the same thing. I warm up by saying out loud sometimes what I'm going to say before. It looks goofy. I'll say it to the mirror, right? I will sometimes do some exercises with my mouth to loosen up my mouth. I dance, I get into that energy. And then when I sit in front of the camera before it starts, you get yourself into the zone like you're already there, right? So that you don't have that moment of, let's say the camera goes on and you're live and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have to talk now. Well, what if you got that out of the way a couple minutes before you actually had to show up too?
I love it.
So a couple of things, but I would say like really just literally getting my blood pumping, especially if I'm having a day where I'm not quite feeling it, makes a huge, huge difference. And then, put on something you feel good in, right? And that's different for everybody. But for me, I love putting on some fun earrings or really just showing my personality, because when I was on the news, I couldn't do things like that. I couldn't wear my hair curly. I couldn't put on funky earrings. Like I had to have that reporter look, right? So I think just bringing my personality and really preparing for that, because you do have to kick it up a notch on camera. Even if I'm not suggesting you pretend to be this big extrovert, but you have to kick it up a few notches, because the camera, some of that energy is lost through the camera. So, getting yourself to that, higher level, because it's going to come down a little bit when you hit record.
Whenever clients start a podcast and they record the intro, I always say to them, you need to get over enthusiastic, because the intro obviously goes over music. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, you've really got to be moving around, and you need to sound like a crazy person when you're reading your intro. And they go, okay. And then they get it back from the editor where they've overlaid it over the music, and they went, oh, I sound so flat.
Yes.
I can't believe how flat I sound. And they're like, I felt like I was over enunciate. I felt ridiculous while I was saying it, but you really, because the energy gets lost with the music.
It really does. I love that. And I have two things about that. The first is record your intro last, after you've got your energy going. And then you've got that, in your mind, you've already done it and you're excited about it. And now you're going to record it. So, you could record it first, but then do another take at the end, because your energy may be different at that point. The other thing is, even when you're doing videos where you're doing a voice underneath the video, and I work directly with clients on what I call the sizzle reel, which is your about me reel, the reel that introduces you. You pin it to your social, you play it before presentations, things like that. And the number of times I have to coach them through how to read their scripts when they're not showing up on camera. You really need to kick it up a few notches. And sometimes that means reading the lines a few times and emphasizing different words and seeing what sounds better and playing it back to yourself. That's a huge, huge thing that a lot of people overlook.
Amazing. Great tips. So many great tips for people using video in all kinds of situations. Thank you for taking the time to be here today, Shirlee, and sharing all of your wonderful expertise with us.
And thank you so much for having me, Emma. I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to speak to you again soon.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling expanded to what's possible for you, motivated to take action, and inspired about how you can start to own your energy. I share even more tools and resources on my Introverts Only email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the Ambitious Introvert products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of introvert-friendly inspiration. Sign up now at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes. See you next week.